Okay, so I'm going to explain what we've learnt so far this week in our Law 202 class, Public Law. This week we've done Chapter 2 of Constitutional Law, and we were focusing on federalism. So basically, the Constitution recognizes two forms of government, or two levels of government. So the first is national, which is known as federal government, and then there's state government. The different types of government systems. There's the federal system, which is shared between the national and the state. And then there's confederal systems, which is states or regions that hold the most power, and then where the central government is weak compared to the states that hold the most power. And then there's the unitary system, where it's the opposite. So the central government holds most power, and then the local government are controlled by the state governments. Some clauses that are important are the necessary and proper clause, which is, it basically allows Congress to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying out its constitutional responsibilities. There's the commerce clause, which gives the Congress the power to regulate commerce among the states and between US and other foreign countries. There's the supremacy clause, which is where any state or local law that conflicts with the Constitution or the United States is invalid. Then there's some theories of federalism. The first one is dual federalism, which is the idea that the national government is supreme, only when its jurisdiction is explicitly granted by the Constitution. There's hierarchical federalism, which is the theory that national government is supreme to the state's government. Then there's cooperative federalism, which is increased interaction between the states and the the national government or the federal government in an effort to effectively regulate and administer law and programs. So the judiciary has to deal with federalism issues in the preemption doctrine, which is state laws that conflict with the national legislation are invalid, and the dormant commerce clause doctrine, which is state laws that interfere with interstate commerce, even if the subject is unregulated by the national government, is also invalid. And then the intergovernmental immunity doctrine, which is the federal government receive higher immunity from state regulation than the states do from federal regulation. So basically the rule is that states can't interfere with the federal government, but the federal government can regulate the states. Police power means the power of state governments to make and enforce the laws necessary to maintain the welfare of the public. States regulate business and commerce under police power. Federal government regulates interstate commerce, foreign commerce, and commerce with Indian tribes, which is basically, Indian tribes is like a federally recognized group of Native Americans which have their own government. Okay, so the 10th Amendment basically says, it's known as the States' Right Amendment, and it's basically saying powers not given to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people. So whatever powers the federal government doesn't have, the people have, or the states have. And then on the other side, the 9th Amendment states the Bill of Rights does not contain all rights. People have rights that are not listed in the Constitution. It doesn't mean they don't exist. So yeah, just because it doesn't mention it in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean a person doesn't have a certain right just because it isn't listed. There's some rights that people have in the US that aren't explicitly listed in the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. And then to reduce absolute power that the government has, there's the US government power is divided into 3 branches. There's Article 1, which is the legislative branch, which is Congress, basically. And Congress has 2 chambers. There's the House and the Senate. And there's Article 2, which is known as the executive branch, which is controlled by the president. And then there's Article 3, which is the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court and all the lower courts underneath.